Well, welcome to our monthly constituent meeting. I'll try to be a little bit more informal, given the crowd we have.
In the front row.
No, please do. I think a lot of times we'll have 10, 15 people here, and every once in a while we'll have a low turnout. It can be for any number of reasons, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine. And my apologies for actually being late. I'm on the House Appropriations Committee. That's my standing committee. I'm on a couple other committees on the side, if you will. And this time of year, if you understand how budgets work through government, they start on the House side. And we have to vote the budget out by next Friday. So a lot of moving parts. I walk down the hall and I get stopped 4 times, to have a conversation about this, or I need to go track that down. And that's what happened. That delayed my process today. So we're working on about, I think, what amounts to about an $8.3 billion budget right now. Some of that's a little bit what I call inflated by federal monies that have flowed into the state in the last couple of years. In some ways, it's been I guess a good problem to have. But because with our congressional delegation, they were very sensitive to small state needs. And Senator Lee in particular made sure that small states got minimum amounts of money in all these different tranches of money. So on a per capita basis, we've done probably, if not the best, second best in the country in terms of the revenue flow goes. But at the same time, I think we've all tried to be strategic in our decision making and looking at these are not ongoing funds. They might be 3 or 4 years, but they're not into the future. And so we've tried to make investments that we think are appropriate, that whether that's infrastructure, whether that's clean water, whether it's housing stocks, things like that. Try to make sure that those monies get used in an appropriate way. Is it perfect? No. We're probably going to get to the end of it and find that we've committed to do some programmatic things with one-time money. But we're trying to be smart about that. So that's where I'm coming from. No, by the way, did I even say who I was? Well, I know Sharon knows me, and you know me from the meeting, so I don't feel so bad.
No.
I do that all the time.
Well, you're in rush mode right now.
Sorry,
so.
But that's my introduction. And
Yep, and I'm Edie Granning, and I am new to the legislature. I serve on Housing and Economic Development, and I am not as busy as Trevor, but have been working really late hours this week. I'm thrilled to be here and not sitting in a committee room at this exact moment. We're working on our workforce development bill, and we, I think, now have 40 or 45 different sections of it. So it's big, and mostly we're trying not to add without cutting this bill, but it's lots of different pieces, lots of different ways that we're trying to support workforce in Vermont. So.
yeah, and I think what Edie's speaking to also is that in our work in appropriations, we know this work's going on out there, and we're trying to understand as much as possible what they're doing in those committees and what the money impacts are of that, so that we can factor that into sort of our calculations and what have you. Of course, whatever we do, it goes to the Senate, and they'll change things for sure.
On the budget bill, because of the influx of some federal dollars, is there anything available to give a shot in the arm to, say, tourism infrastructure? I had a wholesale candy and foods business where we were very heavily dependent upon tourism all over the state. I sold it 20-some years ago. I still have friends. I worked in the hotel industry after that, and I know the Convention and Visitors Bureau gets historically very, very little funding from the state, and they're competing against multi-million-dollar budgets from Boston and the like of Portland, and I know Portland is probably a closer analogy, and I know Portland is dumping a ton of money into their visitors bureau. Is there anything like that to help? 'Cause I mean, these guys are paying record high wages right now, and they're doing everything they can, but it brings a lot of money and a lot of revenue into the state.
Yeah, there's ACD, there's money to ACCD, there's a little bit of advertising money, and there is other money for, and I'm gonna use the wording wrong, but tourism infrastructure.
Right.
Right, like bathrooms at trailheads and things like
Okay.
that, like for that,
Mhm.
those kind of things, so there's money in, for our, for
With like destination,
advertising.
well, not just advertising and also just roadway infrastructure. I mean, where we live, how many signs do you see, or how many times do you see on Front Porch Forum, oh, somebody else got stuck in the notch?
I don't know anything about the transportation budget. That's
Is
not
that
my.
transportation? Is there tourism dollars? I mean.
Well, I can't speak to the tourism dollars, I really don't know the answer to that.
Yeah,
But-
we had two lines that we looked at
Okay.
that came to us that go through a different person in Trevor's committee
Awesome.
With what, tourism?
with, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure who handles that. with
Yeah,
NCCD.
Tristan.
Probably Tristan Tolino.
Yeah.
But as far as infrastructure goes, we certainly, the Infrastructure Jobs Act, we've got a lot of money flowing right now. It's up to $1 billion over 5 years. What's different, and the Inflation Reduction Act also, which is, got a lot of climate change elements to that. But the infrastructure bill is primarily transportation. It's a lot of transportation. But also infrastructure like clean water, those kinds of things, those kinds of, which is good, because we have an unmet need of about $800 million just in that clean water space right now, and probably, I think our deficit in transportation funding based on our need and what we're able to spend is probably somewhere around $150 million a year in deficit. So, but the challenge for us is that this particularly the infrastructure money requires a state match.
Right.
And the other stuff that's come before that, it's just been, here's your money. They might prescribe that you have to use it this way, but there was no match requirement to that. And so one of the conversations we're having right now is, what does that look like in terms of match, and what we think we might go for? And are we going to, the governor made a recommendation about setting money aside because we are running surplus monies right now in addition to the federal money that's come in. And so we're trying to figure out whether we want to do what the governor wants, or do we have something that's a little bit different, but still trying to, in our opinion, maximize our opportunity in terms of pulling down
I
federal.
was thinking along the lines of like the rail trails. I mean, I'm a.
That's where there's money for that.
So like, I own 2 snowmobiles. So I use it, I've paid a lot of money in trail fees and stuff like that has gone into fixing the rail beds. But as a person who also likes to get on my bicycle in the summertime, I found it fantastic to be able to go to Cambridge, hop on the rail bed, cruise around. I mean,
Yeah.
advertising and letting more people know about, bike tour opportunities or self-guided bike tours with beds and breakfast, bed and breakfast and things like that. That's the kind of,
Yeah, so there
But-
are
That's the
two,
kind of
there are
stuff.
2 lines in the budget specifically geared toward the Memorial Rail Trail
Okay, cool.
right now, yeah.
Yeah, one of the things,
Don't ask me what the numbers are because
Yeah.
I can't remember
Yeah.
that. but-
Actually, the
I could
rail
look it
trail, the Memorial Rail Trail is almost completely
Right.
completed. And that's because the government, well, our government
Yep.
administration decided that we would fund that directly as opposed to how it was going along
Yep.
with sort of a
Piecemeal
nonprofit
back.
trying to make it work. And they were having a fair amount of success with that.
Vast has done a lot of work.
But we
Yeah.
put a lot of actually general fund dollars
Yep.
into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it
Be-
shows.
And a lot of it was because of what you're talking about in terms of creating traffic, whether it's local folks or people from out of state, but also they're in all these different communities. and they're buying products or staying there or whatever.
Ties communities together too.
Yeah, I think so.
Boca
Yeah.
and Hardwick and Morrisville
Yeah.
and Cambridge and Danville and all these towns can
Right.
be, can
Sure.
connect and work together to help bring people to them.
Yep, so the challenge is that there isn't an overarching body. And so to put the amenities at the trailheads, each town or locality, municipality has to do that piece on their
Right.
own. And so a lot of it depends on what kind of supports and structures they have and what kind of capacity they have to put those in.
Yep.
And so we're looking at how to support that, but yeah.
Love it.
All of those conversations from a few weeks ago are coming back to me now, so.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, and there is a fair amount of money for municipalities to tie in, to take advantage of, and we just passed, put $3 million into the Budget Adjustment Act that goes into the administration's office secretary to basically provide support for small towns and communities to access that money, which we think is important. So it's not the money itself, but it's like you really don't have the capacity in Underhill, let's say, just to pick on Underhill.
Right, right.
But you can utilize these folks and do that kind of thing. So probably not so much an issue in Chittenden County, but certainly in the Northeast Kingdom and other places around the state where they don't have that capacity, so. Do you have any questions, Sharon? or-
Well, I'm interested in the energy bill. I've been kind of out of state for a while, so on Front Porch Forum, I've been reading all the things that, how horrible it is and all
Talking about the
that.
Affordable Heat Act, yeah.
Pardon me?
The Affordable Heat
Yeah,
Act,
right,
yeah.
how unaffordable the heat act is.
Well, yeah, that's
So
the new name for it.
That was what I'm interested in.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I will tell you that I've learned that it's mostly turned into a study to figure out what the next steps are.
Okay.
Personally, I'm not very excited about that. I'm not
About it
excited
being a
about.
study?
I'm not excited about spending a lot of money on another study when there have already been at least 9 studies.
Yeah.
I think that there are better ways that we can make inroads, and ways that we can do it without costing people a lot of money. And so I'm hopeful that some of these new ideas are going to come forward, but I'm thinking that it's probably going to end up being mostly a study when it
Okay,
comes out
so
of, because it
has
just
it
passed
been
the Senate.
voted?
The Senate passed it out of the Senate and it's come to the House.
Okay.
And so Natural Resources gets it?
It would be
Gets
energy,
it.
and
Oh.
environment and
Environment and
energy,
energy gets it,
the
yes.
new committee.
Okay.
No, I think,
It's
fine, go ahead.
Yeah, no.
Oh.
I don't have anything else to say about it.
We passed essentially the same legislation last year, and the governor vetoed it. And we had a veto override vote on that, and it failed by 1 vote.
Wow.
So,
Chances are it won't fail this year then if he vetoes it again, like you said.
well, no, I mean, but it's interesting you say that because I'm trying to be objective and
Yeah.
because I'm kind of where Edie is a little bit, but.
Right.
But I think objectively speaking, I think it's a little different space and landscape out there right now. I think there are some legitimate concerns, and I think there's a little pullback,
Right.
to Edie's point.
Because of the economic, because of
Well-
inflation and that kind of thing?
Yeah, well, here's my observation, okay? I knew that going into town meeting last week that I would probably get some of these questions, right? From all the folks, right, lots of folks, so. I decided to read a little bit more about it, even though we haven't seen the new bill that's coming. And even the advocates and proponents of this, right, talk a lot about saving money down the road, things like that. And then I think that's legitimate. I think that's exactly, think about solar panels 15 years ago or whatever. If people had done it then, that haven't done it,
Right. I installed mine 6 years ago.
would have saved money. So, but there's an investment in doing that, and certainly the states and the federal government tried to help that, incentivize that. That's kind of where I think everyone's trying to get a good handle on what that needs to look like, because there is a fair amount of investment on the front end of making this work. I don't think there's any question that it could work and will work. But, you know, anyway, so when I read the information from the advocates and proponents of this, they talk a lot about savings, but they don't necessarily get real specific about what it costs or what the investment is on the front end. And that's part of my frustration, I will say that. Because I need to be able to answer that and be able to respond to folks that ask me questions. And it's not that I don't think this is a good thing, but I think the messaging is a little off.
Yeah, so my concerns with it are quite a few, actually. You know, I told you, my family's been in Vermont for 233 years. My family's seen a lot of changes around here. Certainly in my life, I grew up here, I left, my dad got sick, I came home, and I'm still here. But when I ride my snowmobile around, or when I used to be able to go hiking, you know, I saw pristine wilderness. I saw, you know, pastures. I saw beautiful landscapes. And in those same places now, I get blinded by the reflection off the solar panels, or I'm staring at wind turbines on mountaintops. And it's not just here. I spend a lot of time in Maine where my son is as well, and the wind turbines there are worse. They're everywhere. Western New York, it's awful what they've done to the horizon landscape out there. But as a person in my financial situation, I am really concerned about more of a cost shift when I already pay a lot for taxes. I pay a lot for my vehicles. I pay, with the exception of my disabled veteran discount on my property taxes, I pay full freight for everything. I get no breaks. And it seems obvious that if you're going to subsidize in front, you know, the costs are front loaded and you have to subsidize people who can't afford these costs, that's going to come out of people like me. The problem is people like me are also the most mobile, and we can leave. I want to leave, been here a long time. But if it's more financially advantageous to move to northern Maine, Montana, or Tennessee, states that I'm looking at moving to, there's really no reason for me to stay anymore and keep paying more and more and more and getting less and less and less. That's my concern.
Well, I have a friend who 10 years ago or so wisely invested in heat pump, in solar energy, and then installed heat pumps in his house, and you know it's working great for him. It's, you know, he's still paying on his solar panels. I think he had a loan, you know, for a certain number of years, but he got a lot of breaks that aren't available now.
Right.
And as a taxpayer, I probably paid those, but I also think we have to think ahead. And if you just say, oh gee, you know, those solar panels are so ugly. Well, I'm sitting out there looking at a telephone pole or an electric pole, and I bet that when they came 50 years ago, people didn't think they were very pretty either.
Right.
But they bring a lot of advantages to our life.
I remember when the sandbar flooded and the power lines came down. And then instead of putting new power lines up, they buried them. And the view was so much better as you're going across the sandbar. I 100% agree with you. I just think that we have to be measured in our approach. I'm glad to hear that you're really taking a thoughtful approach as to how the proponents are, what is the cost and where is it going to come from before you start voting to approve this. Maybe another study isn't the answer, but I don't think moving forward without knowing the answers to those questions is either. I mean, I agree, I live here,
Yeah.
that's great.
Yeah, I do think that some of those answers are out there. My comment's more about they're not putting that as part of the message, right? And so I think that's knowable. And we'll see the new bill, the bill that's coming over from the Senate, and we'll do our work with that, so. Yeah, but to your point, someone who's sort of in the middle of the income range, if you will, if I can use that as a characterization.
Sure.
Then, yeah, but we also live in a great state, and we get talking about high taxes or this or that, but I also think there's a lot of value for what we have here too. So that's sort of, I've been in different states.
Me too.
So,
I've lived around
so,
in various places around the world.
yeah,
Yeah,
anyway,
Yeah.
okay,
yeah.
So we're waiting to learn.
yeah.
Short answer.
Good.
I hope it does more than just a study.
When you do find out, will you be posting that on Front Porch Forum or sending, at least letting us know, like, here's a link to go to read the actual, here's what's being voted on? I like to read the bills myself.
Edie and I can talk about how we want to handle that. Certainly we'll talk about it here.
Right.
I'm going to be totally honest with you. I don't get on Front Porch Forum and delve into controversial issues in that space.
Yep.
Because
Yeah, I won't do it back and forth in front porch.
Yeah,
forum.
No. Like,
nobody
I mean,
wins
like
in
a
that
posting, like,
space.
the bill is available, the bill is gonna be voted on, or the bill is coming out of the House, or just so we know when, before it's voted on, what's being voted on?
Sure.
Is there a way to keep track of that that isn't necessarily Front Porch Forum? How do we do that?
It's follow the committee is really the way.
Okay.
Yeah,
And that's through the legislature's
Website.
The Vermont House?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, let me think about that.
Yeah.
In terms of our own constituency.
Yeah.
Front Porch Forum is really valuable. There's
Right.
no question. We have so many, it provides so much utility, right? But I just feel that's not the place to enter into those conversations.
Okay, I meant more as like an.
It's tricky.
Yeah, no, I
understand your
yeah.
position, though.
Yeah.
That would be a mess for you.
I've been trying to get a weekly update organized, and then I had a long delay on getting my government page set up because I have a personal and a school board, and I think
Yeah.
there was a little bit of a. So if I can start doing that, and then we've been head down at crossover, so I've been
Yeah.
really very upside down. But let me, I'll work harder on that.
Again, you have your plate full. If there's a way that I can track it myself, I'm happy to do that. Just, 'cause I like to stay informed and have a fair amount of time on my hands these days.
Well, that particular bill, which is S5, is in an Environment and Energy House. And all our committees have websites
Okay.
that you can go to.
So I can go to the
And
House
you,
Senate.
and you can look at the actual documents and whether they've been changed.
Right.
And you can also, we post all the testimony that we receive in committee.
Yep.
It's rare that we have testimony that doesn't have a document attached to that electronically.
Yep.
So,
And you can watch testimony live even if you want.
I got
Or you
time,
can
but
wait on delay and watch it in like 1.5 speed.
at 3 a.m.
well, one of the things the pandemic has given us is this hybrid environment now where we've sort of maintained, the YouTube, the streaming and things like that wasn't available before. So I think there's
Right.
certainly an increased opportunity for folks to be plugged in if they choose to be.
Right.
Yeah, to the point that on Tuesday, we had a power outage for an hour in the State House and everything halted because we couldn't be live, so folks couldn't have access to our meetings.
Right.
So we waited until the power came back on.
Yeah, it's a rule that we have now in the House and Senate that it has to be live streamed. We all have the technology, so when we lose it, like we could operate our own computers, but the whole technology piece had
Does that
to
mean the
come.
legislatures don't have to go to Montpelier? They can.
Oh, no, we're.
Oh, no,
yeah.
no, I'm not
That's
saying that.
That's for
Yeah.
the public,
But
not.
it's,
Yeah.
it's more about public, and in some cases, although we've just changed, we had to change, well, partly because of me, actually. The Senate always had a rule. They carried their rule over from sort of more of a pandemic period where if they had COVID and things like that, that they could participate remotely and vote remotely. So, but they have a smaller group too, and I think it's a little easier to police. We have a larger group, and I think that's part of a rationale. We didn't have that. So anyway, I was on the conference committee for the Budget Adjustment Act. There's 3 House members and 3, but I came down with COVID. And so I was able to join remotely and be part of it and do my part of it, but I couldn't vote. Wasn't able to vote. So the rule changes, we've just gone through some more rule changes about that. I wasn't the only one who got COVID. We had 4 members that's just on our committee that got it too. So we've made some changes, but we still don't do that remotely on the floor. Floor debate has to be in person. But it does provide, people live in Brattleboro or someplace like that didn't want to give testimony or need to give testimony. Why should they drive 2.5 hours each way?
Right,
You
for a
know.
20-minute conversation, yeah.
And Edie hasn't quite experienced this yet, but she will. As we get busier and busier in the session, you may have scheduled someone to give testimony in your committee, and then the floor goes a lot longer, and they don't get to give testimony because there's no time left in the day. So imagine traveling all that way and,
Yeah.
really? Although most people understand that that's always a possibility, but yeah.
Yeah.
But the hybrid piece of it has been sort of a silver lining of that whole process in COVID in terms of creating that public participation. So, do you have any other questions?
What else is
You know we have the
boiling?
concerns.
Oh, childcare,
Childcare.
early education. We've got competing bills there. Yeah, and then we list in appropriations today, we had the House version of paid leave, paid family and medical leave.
Insurance,
And what?
paid family medical leave insurance.
Yeah, and there's a bill that's coming over, is being discussed in the Senate right now. It's actually quite different than the House version,
Mhm.
because it's all, they put it back just to family. And took out the
Okay.
they pulled it down.
Is that the one they
so-
tacked on the child care bill?
No, I don't think they did
They
that.
tacked one on
Yeah.
just the other day.
So those are
I've
the-
been so head down in workforce that it's hard right now, because I've been working with a little bit with the Education Committee and with the Corrections Committee on their workforce development pieces, and also trying to keep up with so really deep digging and, learning from everybody else at the same time. So I'm head down right now. I feel like
Yeah.
I need to look around and see what else is going on.
Yeah, and there's a lot of conversation about housing still. You certainly have a housing situation. And when you talk about workforce development and things like that, it's well known that we have a lot more jobs than we have folks looking for work. And so the child care and
Childcare,
housing and things,
workforce.
they're all related. They're all related,
Yeah.
right?
So a couple
So-
years ago at town meeting, I brought up a fact that Brendan, he went to school in Maine.
Mhm.
He stayed in Maine to work.
Mhm.
And part of the reason he stayed in Maine is because the state of Maine has a higher education tax credit that helps him recover what he pays on his student loans.
Mhm.
Dollar for dollar up to a certain limit.
Yep, so ours is much smaller, but we put in the workforce development, $5,000 if you stay for 2 years after graduating.
Okay.
So it hasn't passed yet,
But
but our committee is super excited about it. And then we have a number of loan forgiveness programs for people who work in the highest, in the critical needs jobs in Vermont.
Yeah.
Especially
Underserved
going to the state, Vermont State University, State University,
Yeah,
Vermont.
that's what it's called now.
So there's a lot of that,
Good.
critical needs, healthcare, those kind of.
And what about vocational type stuff?
And then later this month, we are going to be getting 2 reports from tech One is on the high school tech programming, and the other is on the adult tech programming.
Right.
And they've been studying what's working and what's not, and how to improve those in the state. And so we're looking at, our committee will be looking at both of those later this month.
So there's a new
So
vintage
that's-
out there right there too then.
Yep, and we have, and then the last piece is teachers, and we're looking at loan forgiveness for teachers also in this bill. So, yeah, there's a lot of the one-time money. We're looking at short-term programming. I'm hoping that's where it's coming from. You'll know more about where it's coming from.
Yeah, I mean, the ARPA's
But-
drying up, quite frankly.
Yeah.
But we have put a lot of investments into training and loan forgiveness kinds of things, and also
But we
trying
need
to,
people to stay.
and target it to what Edie's talking about, critical kinds of positions, things like that.
I just want to add one more thing, because I just
Yeah, go
remember one
ahead.
more piece. You have to live in Vermont and work in Vermont. So we're not looking at folks moving to Vermont with remote jobs. We're not looking at any of those kind of pieces, because that's really counterproductive for
Vermont
housing.
employers and
Vermont
everybody
employer, you
else.
can work from home
Right.
for a Vermont employer and live in Vermont and qualify, but you can't, right, so there are lots of pieces that you have to need
So that
to
would
be
apply,
eligible.
say somebody comes here from, I don't know, southern Connecticut to go to Castleton.
Yeah.
That's throwing out what ifs out there.
Yep,
If they stay here and become residents, they're eligible for the program.
yep,
Perfect. That's,
yep. It's
I
not,
love
it's
to
not
hear
done,
stuff like that.
yeah, it's in there, so we're
Yeah,
working on it.
that's great.
It, yeah, okay.
Yeah, and in terms of education too, I mean, if you have 75% or below of the median income, right, as a family or whatever household, you can get a free education at Community College of Vermont, essentially. We sort of
Yeah.
structured that. So we are trying to find those places and that's not just one-time money. These
Yeah.
programs are quite successful, and we have data to support that.
Yeah.
So we'll be continuing that work.
Is there any connection to students who might be, for lack of a better term, scared of trying college because nobody in their family's done it, to maybe start with CCV and then transition to a state university? Is there anything like that? Because I know a lot of, I know kids that didn't go to college because they were afraid of it, and
I
that's
think that's,
sad.
yeah, I think that's often done through the schools, through the high schools.
Okay, so
Making
there's
those
program.
recommendations.
Good.
And then when you can go to CCV for free,
Mhm.
it makes it so much easier to try it, right? And then those courses do transfer. So
Okay.
it is, yeah, and what we're trying to do is set up programs where folks can build certificates and that stack to help them to get to the next level. So it could stack to an associate's degree, which could lead them toward a bachelor's degree, or it can just be certificates that make them more marketable. And I went to the Lake Champlain Chamber of Commerce breakfast, and I was talking to employers to say, what else do you need? They said, when we see folks who can meet these certificates, who can get a certificate, that tells us that they can work to finish something, and they have the gumption, and we're happy to train them more. So I think we're setting ourselves up to be successful.
I've been to many of those breakfasts. I used to work for the Chamber of Commerce.
Yep.
Before I worked there, I ran their soundboards for them. I worked for the audiovisual company that did their soundboards. So yeah, I mean, I have been there. I was working there when Brendan was born. Let's put it that way. It's a while.
Anything else?
No, thank you very much, both of you,
Thanks, guys.
for your work and for being here tonight.
Okay.
Well, thanks for
Appreciate
coming.
it. We're
Thank
glad
you.
to be here.
Yeah.
And you can always reach out to us. I do my best to get back to folks. I do read everybody's email. I'm not always able to get back. I think this is, again, Edie doesn't have a reference point here, but this is my, going into my 7th year. And I've never seen as much communication this year as I've never seen it quite so much before as I have this year.
That makes me feel better.
Yeah, it really has just been overwhelmed. Well, I won't say overwhelming.
It's been a
but
lot.
when you get a lot, it's tough. It really is hard.
You open more avenues of communication and you're gonna get more communication.
Well, that's true. I mean, my wife, Linda Almy, used to be the rep here in Jericho, under, well, Bolton at the time, 87 to 97. She said, I never had to worry about that stuff. You know? And she purposely didn't have voicemail.
Say she must have started shortly after Roland Burroughs retired.
No, she was with Roland Burroughs for some period of time. So it was,
Roland was a mentor of mine, and he grew up with
yeah, yeah. Well, she obviously ran when she was younger.
Yeah.
And she did that before I met her. I didn't know, it was afterwards. So, yeah. All right. Well, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate
Thanks
it.
a lot. Appreciate it.
So, and thank you for filming.
Yes.